Colonization and settlement by people of European descent, the place we know as Evanston was home to the Potawatomi, Odawa, and Ojibwe tribes, also known as the Council of the Three Fires. It also served as an important crossroads and meeting place for a number of other indigenous tribes and nations, including the Ho-Chunk, Illinois, Nauka, Kickapoo, Menominee, Peoria, and Sac. We acknowledge and honor the original people of this land, as well as the indigenous people that still call this area home, and support their continued work for justice, self-determination, and sovereignty. In so doing, we honor indigenous protocol and remind ourselves and our community that land acknowledgements do not exist in the past tense.
Thank you. Is there a citizen comment?
There is one person signed up for in person. Akila Bay. I pronounced that correctly. Akila Bay. Akila Bay.
You can take a. Hang on 1 second.
Yes.
Amamu, take and roll. Dada, Hudson, Falk, here. Higgins. Kelleher, Mills,
Here.
Shay,
Here.
Shire,
Here.
Wallen.
Here.
Before we move on, I'll entertain a motion to allow full participation for trustees attending virtually.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Thank you. Dada, yes, Falls. Yes. Higgins. Kelleher.
Yes.
Mills.
Yes.
Shay.
Yes.
Shire.
Yes.
Wallen.
Yes.
Thank you. Excellent. And now for citizen comment.
Hello, everyone. I am Aquila, Aquila, last name Bay, he is in boy, he is in Edward Watson Young. The agency I am with is Federation for Law and Government. I'm the executive chair. The local business that we have here was called Aquila Consultant at 1603 Orange Avenue. Our focus is community and social services, and we, try our best to come and communicate to those who are in charge, and also to those who really would like to see if someone is interested in learning something better about the services that are offered at our library. So one of the things that was discussed is whoever, and we'll think to find out through my search, but a lot of times people do come into the library and they see things that are posted on the board. Now, all of the boards, there are 3 floors, of course. We have the main board right outside the door here. And then before you go into the back areas, there's one board on each side, and there's information on those boards. One of the biggest things is that when somebody wants this information, no one, staff or patrons, know the procedure. So today I went through the procedure of asking the question of staff, and I took the use of the library bulletin board down. And I took it to staff and I said, hey, this is something you all authorized, you put up, I would like to have a copy. After a little bit of a time, they stated that, I don't know where any of these would be, so we have to make a copy of it. Okay, great. So there should be a difference between communicating to a patron or communicating to anyone who comes into the library and be able to say to them, well, because this is something, of course, that is on our board, let me go ahead and make you a copy if that's what you would like. And then it ends there. My conversation upstairs went for a long time because she went through the idea that it's 50 cents for a color copy and it's 20 cents for a regular copy. And so now you're going into communicating about my free copies that I use to print my resume, my free copies that I use for something else. This deals with something that you have posted, and I'm over 50 years old. I'm not good with all this technology, and I just want a copy. Staff should be taught in some manner that if there's something that we have in this library that we're posting as library patrons, library staff, then the staff should be able to say, oh, sure, if you want a copy, I'll get you one. And that should be the end of the conversation. There should not be this diluted conversation where I'm being told about the 20 cents and how many pages, and it just goes into this long, drawn out situation where you probably give up and you make a demand, and that could start something that gets tension between a staff member and the community. Because obviously, in some instances, when you go into Whole Foods or someplace like that, it's an instant thing. Who's the manager? Want a copy of something? I'll get the manager, make a copy, and it's over with. Here, that doesn't seem to be the ideology that the staff have. They're trying to figure it out, and I'm bringing it to the board's attention that they should look it over, test it, play with it, see what you think about it, because staff should be able to say that, oh, I see you, you want this information. I don't know where extra copies or whatever are, so let me just make you a copy and move forward. So that's the first issue I had. The second issue I had is I took pictures of all of the boards that we have here, and they are just horrible. And I'm just being honest. This is a library where we talk about education, talk about people who have education who are sitting on our boards. And yet when I come to the first board, whatever. When I get to the second boards, whatever. Third, whatever. It's so unorganized, and there needs to be a format. If you're gonna put something up, it should be on all three levels. Why? Because some senior citizens bring their grandchildren here, they go right over to that child section, they look at that board right there, thinking that all that information that you have on all floors would be in that area there. It's an assumption. I understand that that's, digs on it. But as far as this being a public library and knowing that we should not assume that people are going to walk all three floors to read information on all three, 8 bulletin boards, 7 bulletin boards that are in this building. So that's the next thing I wanted to advise the board of, is that when I walk in this library as a 50-plus-year-old man, I may just want to go to your main board here, read what's going on, take a picture. If there's something on the lanyard there, take a copy of it. And then if not, then I can ask staff who should be trained to say, oh, sure, bring it to me. I'll make a copy. You can put it back up. And the staff should say, hey, make a copy and I'll put it back up. Okay, so that goes to the roundabout of the situation dealing with these boards, because again, when you walk through the library, it looks too tacky. We are a good library. I myself have been here many years. I've seen how the staff interact, but in some cases, when there's something that needs to be brought to the attention, then I bring it here so that you all can marinate on it, think about it, and see if we can do something about it. Now, my final issue dealing with the boards is that I'm going to, can the secretary raise her hand so I know who I'm giving these to? The board should have or see that this Hartwell Place Assistant Living Memory Care flyer is on the 3rd floor, hiding in the very rear. And I want the secretary to take this so that the secretary can look at it and say, okay, we're authorizing this to be in our building, but it's such a place. Okay, we're talking about, memory care, we're talking about senior care, we're talking about senior citizens. We're saying we're the library and we're saying we're offering all these different services, but yet this is all the way in the corner in the back on the 3rd floor. It should be, and I'm taking pictures. This is not on the board, and I think this is important to be on the board in that manner. The next one is, again, daycare club. So here's the daycare club, and very important. I think it's very important for the community to know that you're offering the opportunity for people to take a flyer dealing with memory care and dealing with daytime memory programs that are happening within the community. So something that, you all are talking about. And I should be able to walk in the library and look on the first lanyard there and see this information. I shouldn't have accidentally, if I ever as a senior citizen, go to the third floor and go all the way to the back where the computers are and look up against that wall and see that, because when I go back there, I'm generally seeing books. But this is here.
So I just want to let you know that it is normally not common practice for board members to respond to public comment.
That's why I was saying raise your hand, secretary. 'Cause I was
Right,
thinking,
so that's not normal and not common practice, so. You
of
won't
course, I'm
get
sorry,
that
I'm
too quick.
sorry,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make it seem as though I was talking to the president or so. And again, I'll repeat that I did know that rule, and that's why I was asking that at the end of this, I would like to give the secretary a copy of each of these, so the secretary can put it in the minutes, the record, and see that I'm talking about these items. The next and final thing that I have is Alzheimer's US pointer. US pointer shows the behavior impact, so from on brain health. This flyer, same thing in the back. And again, it's so far in the back that you have to go through a couple other items back there to see that this is here. And so my thing is that we want to be, as patrons, as donors, as participants, we want to be able to walk in the library and say that my library is doing everything it can to make sure that everyone is included in all these things that we offer. So if this is something that has been offered and placed up, then it should be in a place to see it. Also, there's a service for older adults with technology, virtual memory cafe, which I think is here, right? Anyway, yes, it is. In any event, here it is right here. It's a 2-pager. And it's again in the back, and there is a tier of plastic with 3 rows, and there's just information, a wealth of information there. And as I looked, and this is on 3rd floor, and then when I go towards the bathrooms where you have the able office as well as the other side, none of this information is there. So I wanted to give that to the secretary this morning. All right, and then now moving
Also,
on.
I apologize for interrupting. It is also not common practice for public comment to be included in minutes. Minutes is a record of what the board is doing,
Yes.
not a public comment.
Thank you again.
Sure.
Now, that's something I didn't catch you. Okay, the next thing that I wanted to talk about is a roundup. And what I mean by that is that according to what I was told, is that it's only 80 cents for me to print something at 20 cents a page, black and white. And color is 50 cents a page. That should be rounded off to $1. 2 color pieces for 5 20-cent pages. I bring that up because people who are saying, okay, I have this 30 cents left, whatever, and I need something done. Sometimes, yes, I don't feel afraid, I don't feel uncomfortable going to the staff and saying, would you assist me, because my resume needs that cover letter in color, and I need my 1-page resume in black and white, or 2 pages in black and white. You know, hey, I can go and ask the question, but as far as what I understand, it's 80 cents, and I believe that it should be looked at as a job instead of 80 cents. And I think that would be it for me as far as communicating to the board or communicating in public comment as to some of the things in which I saw in the library, because I myself am very proud to be an Evanston resident. I also am very proud that I've met the different boards, and I see the hard work and the effort that the boards put in. And they definitely are always asking for feedback. And I find that a lot of us, sometimes we don't feel that we can, or we don't know who to go to. And that's one of the things I'm trying to push, is that even though everybody keeps saying you can go online and you can see this and that, I'm gonna stress my age, being old school, maybe all educated in somebody's opinion or whatever, but I feel that if I am an older adult coming in the library with my grandchild or with little ones, and I know that to be the basic board out there, any information that is floating through this library should be at the main board. And also, all three levels in those areas should have the same wealth of information, even if they tack it up in a certain way. Now, I've done everything dealing with these flyers, and I've done communication about the printing and the price and how that works out. I also brought up the no quorum to the last meeting about the public notice. This again goes towards us being adult over the age of 50. And we know that minutes can change. We know that information can change. We know at the bottom of each meeting, they tell us when the next meeting is. That's fine. I want to pull up my flip phone. I can take a picture if it's blurry or whatever. So let's make it easy. Let's say that we just put notices up and give us a little bit more time. Let my grandchild come over to the residence and I walk into the library once every Tuesday, and I can see that the board meeting's happening on Wednesday from the following week. Give me the opportunity to see this. I've noticed that as I walk past the library or I come in the library, it's been one of those things where everybody's saying, well, and I'm saying, okay. But again, to be all inclusive, to be somebody that's trying to take the technology and all this other stuff out the window and just say, hey, I'm this senior, got my grandkid, coming to the library once a week with my grandkid, and I look through the window and I would like to, hey, there's a meeting next week. I can prepare for that from my memory. I can write it down on a piece of paper at the table right here. That gives that person an opportunity to feel as though they can set the time that they need to be at a meeting, because we want more people to be involved and we want to give them the opportunity. So if I'm, like I said, my little age, when it comes to this library, and I'm asking that if we will please look at the idea, or the public comment should be that if people look at this idea, maybe it'd be encouraging to put up information a little bit later so that people can get an opportunity to write it on their own. Shouldn't be somebody telling me on the street that, oh, well, everything's on the internet. That's not fair to me. I'm not asking me if I even like the internet. There are people out there who don't even use the internet. They ain't the internet. So that was my last issue that I had to bring up about things I saw during this month. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to communicate with you, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you.
Is that all? Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
False.
Oh, you said both? Yes. Sorry.
Kelleher.
Yes.
Mills.
Yes.
Shay. Yes. Sharon. Yes. Walden. South. Yes. Alamo.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Now the director's report.
Hello, good evening. Thank you. The director's report is in your packet. A couple things I want to point out for those of you who have not met him today. I wanted to introduce our new facilities manager, who has been here for a few weeks now, is getting to know the lay of the land and working with Winetta, the assistant facilities manager, to get acclimated to Evanston. So we're very lucky to have Marcos and Winetta, and look forward for them working with you all on facilities issues. The other things in the report, just to point out, as I mentioned last month, the AARP tax aid information, the data is in this month's report about the number of folks who were assisted via that partnership, and a little bit more information about who they were and how much accumulated refunds were seen because of that partnership. So that's interesting information. I also wanted to point out, that there are a number of updates about services and programs as we head into the summer, including information about summer reading program and other summer events that are starting. The one I wanted to highlight tonight is happening on May 28th. It is a partnership that we have developed with the Fleetwood Jourdain Theater. So there'll be an event here at the main library in conversation with a cast of actually I don't know if it's pronounced geese or cheese, but that play is in production right now, and we'll have a Northwestern professor, some of the cast and the artistic director from the theater and some artists. That play is about a group of quilters. And so some visual and fabric artists will be here for that event. So I wanted to put that out to you all through. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the directors.
Are there any questions or comments?
I noticed the writing program, the summer writing, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, if any of you are writers or aspiring writers and you need some help or some encouragement to keep going at your project, I encourage you to join our summer writing challenges.
I just wanted to say that the tax aid is extraordinary, like 675 returns, like that's fantastic. And also exciting to hear about the guaranteed income.
Yeah, so the folks from the city have been tabling here in the lobby twice per week during this month, ahead of the deadline for this round of guaranteed income applications being due. So they have seen some individuals who have been able to apply, who are, visitors to the library, didn't know about the program, or this was a convenient location for them to come and get their questions answered and fill out their application. So that's a great partnership that we are happy to host.
It's a reminder that I think people often experience or think libraries are just stats, but these kinds of services like the supporting people's writing, tax preparation, guaranteed income, like it is a community service of not just a place to get content. So great work. All right, now the administrative services report.
Simeon?
Hello,
Good evening.
just want to let you know on the first thing on HR, the HR, we are having two part-timers in innovation, digital and emotion learning. In which one is on the interview stuff process and then another is like to be posted now. So we have to job positions and we already the direct research that's going on. So that's the overall three positions that I. As far as the finance is concerned, our expense are normally like what we have projected, everything is normal, like what we expect, what we were expecting, we have that. Only thing is, on the capital expenditure, roof, project, like, around 1 million has been posted in our ledger. And, I had talked with city, so this week they were supposed to go for the bonds. So hopefully by next week we'll get update for the bonds and what we received and what is the interest that so we'll get that details. Hopefully by the next board meeting, I'll get more details of that. But this week they said they'll go off for the bonds. And as far as our revenues are concerned, we are getting money from the county. Around like 50% of the levy has been received, out of which like around 600 something is the levy that was for the last year. The overall is around like 50%. If you have any questions. Yeah.
Are there any questions? Thank you very much. Now
Oh,
the
sorry, just one more thing about the endowments. All our money has been transferred from Vanguard to EC.
fantastic,
So hopefully by the next board report. we can-
awesome, thank you. Now the facilities report.
The facilities estate is in your packet, as you are aware, the roof project is underway, almost completed. The anticipation is that it will be finished by the end of May or potentially first weekend in June. Of course, roof work is always weather contingent, so if it stays dry in the next week, they're finishing up some of the last pieces, the major areas have been completed. And then, one thing I wanted to point out, so in the facilities report, we report, the stats from our partnership with Turning Point. So as you know, Turning Point, it's a social service agency that visits the library in two ways. They have their mobile living room, which is a physical vehicle that is outside in front of the main library. And then weekly or sometimes twice a week and over at Crown once a month. And then their mobile crisis response team is the team that has been visiting the main library 3 times a week inside on the 3rd floor. We did recently, were informed by Turning Point that they are ending the mobile crisis response program by the end of June. So they will no longer be sending a team over to be inside the library. So the mobile living room program is still continuing, but the mobile crisis response team program is being discontinued.
Did they say?
Why?
They haven't shared any public statement about that with us, but the anticipated end date is definitely by the end of June. The frequency of their visits will decrease between now and June. So it's not the first behavioral health social service partnership that we've had that has had to, for one reason or another, reduce their hours or service times that they were able to provide in our space. To Tracy's point earlier, we have a lot of partnerships for resource tables and direct service to patrons of the library. They do get used a lot here, so it's disappointing that they have to end that program. Like I said, it's not the first time that a behavioral health or social service agency that is a partner with us has had to reduce their hours or cut back because of capacity. For example, Impact Behavioral Health is another partner that was visiting the main library once a month, and they have to cut back on that because of the capacity of their program. So our engagement staff and librarians are always, pursuing new or revived partnerships. So for example, we're currently in conversation about with Connections for the Homeless to have their outreach team here on a more regular schedule. So we're hoping that we'll be able to do that, but it again depends on their capacity and that agency. So I wanted to let you know that this will be that probably June will be the last month that you see numbers reported from the mobile crisis response. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that report.
Okay. Next is the monthly development report. Good evening.
I should start by congratulating our tribute champions, the destinators. Our other team also did very well. That the report is in your packet, and in the first table with the overall income for the month, although the report does show that the money from our $1 million gift was pledged, as of May, we have actually received cash for that, and so that will show up in the May financials as income and not pledged income. For the campaigns table, as you will see, we had a goal of 20,000 to raise for the spring campaign. And again, since the end of April, the end of these financials, we have actually exceeded our goal and we've raised 24,000 to date for the spring. In June, we'll start the summer campaign. The main activities will include several smaller events and gatherings for specific groups, as well as an action campaign in July, which will be to raise funds for the around the collection. I do want to provide you just a couple of dates for your calendars. These are all on the board calendar. But they are probably 90% set, so just let you know, but on Thursday, June 25th, from 4 to 6 p.m. We have an afternoon tea in the Robert Brown Garden for our leadership donors. That is probably the most tentative date in that we're still trying to we have the reading garden, but that's the date we're shooting for. Thursday, July 9th, from 6:30 to 7:30, we're going to have a gathering for former trustees, which will be co-hosted by Tracy Pulse and Rachel Hayman. That will be here at the library in the Navigation Station. And on Thursday, July 23rd, from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m., we will be having happy hour with EPL Downtown Summer Sounds concert, which is run by Downtown Evanston, the jazz band, swing band, and the people, the partners of the Evanston Public Library are the featured nonprofit for the night. So we'll all be out there just hanging out. So, any questions?
Any questions? No, I just wanted to say that I think your creativity and is really extraordinary, that you are thinking about different ways to support the library, and it's really, I appreciate that. So well done. Any other feedback?
Thank you for all of these new interesting events that are coming up for fundraising. It's just exciting to be a part of that, so thank you for sure.
Thank you. Okay, now we're on to board committee oral reports. I'll start. So these are my oral comments. I have a couple of memos in the packet, but I don't need to talk about those because they're in the packet. But I've been thinking a lot about, over the last several meetings, I found myself thinking a lot about trust, social capital, and community stewardship. The phrase that we do things based on trust has been raised at times, but I think trust is one of the most essential components of any healthy institution. Not blind trust, not unquestioned trust, not trust without accountability, but trust built on consistency, transparency, integrity, relationship, and demonstrated care for the institution and the people it serves. Certainly, policies matter, process matters, and clear governance structures matter, but institutions are ultimately human systems, and no board, library, college, city, or community can function very well if every interaction begins from suspicion. Yesterday, I had an experience that reminded me of this in a very personal way. I was sitting in my office at Oakton when an Oakton police officer stopped by my door and asked if I knew Clarence Foltz, who was my father. And he had shared that he had worked for my dad for a few years and described him as a great man and a good leader. My dad retired 20 years ago and passed away last September. But what struck me was not simply that he remembered my father, but that years later, my father's leadership is still living inside someone's experience of work, professionalism, and humanity. And that's what trust creates. So there's something particularly powerful about how leadership functions when in community. When you live and work in the community you serve, your leadership is not theoretical. Your relationships are interconnected. Your reputation follows you into Valley, into school, into community events, churches, and everyday life. And the social capital you build is deeply personal because you remain accountable to the people around you long after our meetings end. That kind of leadership requires care because you understand that institutions are not separate from the community. They are part of the fabric of our lives. Trust creates environments where people feel seen, heard, and valued. It creates institutions that people want to protect. It creates cultures where people can disagree without immediately assuming bad intent. It creates leadership that long outlasts titles. As I reflect on leadership and stewardship, I hope we never lose sight of the fact that trust is not the opposite of accountability. Trust is what makes accountability sustainable. Thank you. Next, finance.
Great.
Thank you for those comments and thank you for your memo that was included in the board packet. I think that reflecting on accomplishments is something that is always important for any healthy organization, and I really appreciated reviewing all of that. And I'm really proud to have participated in some, but not all of that in my time here on this board. And I think it's just tremendous that you put all that together. So thank you. For finance updates, as you heard from Samir, the bonds have still not been issued in the city, so we have used our contribution, but we're still waiting for the bond to be issued. In terms of the IGA and lease updates, we talked in the finance committee meeting, which continues to be the landing place for that topic for this board. Our lawyer has been working with city council on the issue. Tracy gave us an update after connecting with Kevin, our board attorney. They have a draft that they're working on, but in terms of proposing actual changes, it's can't at this point shop one draft to one body, but not the other. And so it's kind of a who goes first issue. We can't like, have a red line change, go to one, but not the other. So I think they're gonna send, we're expecting here in the next couple weeks, a bulleted set of changes. One thing we know is that an asset transfer of this building to the library board from the city is a non-starter from the city's perspective, which leaves open still the capital needs issue for us, which was our proposal was one idea among what I assume are probably limited ideas for how to help support the library's long-term medium and long-term needs for capital planning here. We have a $22 million need here from our capital planning assessment that we did. And so no real plan right now to do that, but we in an effort to move forward the IGA and lease. It sounds like since there's no agreement on how to do that right now, but they might incrementally then move separate the lease IGA and the service level agreements. So moving forward the IGA first, potentially the lease next, and then the SLAs, because the service level agreements after that, to remind people that service level agreements are the actual nitty gritty of how they would commit to getting done what we're paying for. So how quickly fingerprints get done when you're getting processed for recruitment, and some of the things that have been actually the real inflection point of the commitments of the services that we buy from the city. So all important aspects of getting this accomplished. So we're waiting to see on that. Finally, we're going to talk tonight about search process, and we were talking about resourcing it, which is a request that's included in the memo tonight. So we asked Megan to put together a memo, which is included in the packet. It's one of the next items. And then as for trivia night, I just really wanted to thank the team here at EPL, Onetta, Jennifer, Samir, Heather, people, PEPL people, they were there also supporting it. It was a delightful event, just delightful. So I think everyone seemed to really enjoy themselves. It was a great, new, refreshing way to contribute to the library. I really liked the cadence of it. It moved quickly for a Sunday night, and I think just the work that was put into it made it just a fun event. It was a nice way to use the space. It's hard to believe, is this the same room that we were in? That's kind of crazy because it was really festive and well decorated and cheerful, and now we're back to our lighting was different. Same room. Anyway, tremendous job, everybody. Thank you for being here, and it was a lot of fun. And congratulations, of course, to Victoria's team. So, I talked a big game and did not deliver.
Thank you, Michelle. Before we move on, is everybody, I just want to make sure that everybody is up to speed in terms of what the IGA, the lease, and the SLAs are. You did a great job talking about the SLAs. Is everybody clear about what those three components? Everybody feel confident about them? Do everybody get, maybe? Gene, I can't read that expression.
Yeah, you can summarize. I think that's always good.
Okay, Michelle, would you summarize what each of those components are? And why we care?
For a long time, the last, I guess, 14 years or something, we had an MOU or a memorandum of understanding between us and the city that was commitment to do certain things and arrangements for this building that is not ours, but is city property, but we stay in, like, for example, that we are a tenant here unofficially, but they don't act like a real landlord. And so there's all these, but the MOU
this came after our split because we used to be a department, and once we weren't anymore, there needed to be an agreement between us and the city for how we would all act and whose responsibilities were what. But after a number of years, it became clear that that was an insufficient document, and so what was needed instead was an intergovernmental agreement, because we were different governments, and so, you know, that's the new document. We also needed a lease to sort of frame, what they as a landlord would be responsible for in terms of taking care of this building. Splitting costs for infrastructure that we don't own 50/50 isn't really a correct way to handle that. And so we wanted some better, accountability for a building that we don't own, for example. And that's what we've been trying to work out now for most of the time that I've been on the board.
Several years.
Yeah. And we've really put our foot on the gas with them for the past year and a half while Yolanda was here, trying to really make this happen. And unfortunately, the sticking points around capital planning and the SLAs, the service level agreements, those two issues have been the biggest sticking points, because those are really difficult problems to solve right now. So we right now we're spending $350,000 a year purchasing services from the city, and those need to be defined better so that we're getting value for those services versus going out into the private sector and buying those services somewhere else, which we could do and don't. And we've seen some improvement in some of the services that, like, for example, the IT, I think, and it's a good example where we're seeing some improvement, but we are continuing to work on the parameters of what we're purchasing to make sure we're getting value, and the taxpayers aren't being essentially double charged for that, both, you know, through us and then through the city too, for not providing those services, and that we would have to then go out and buy them, like we've had to do several times with HR services, where we go out and pay for a search privately because we're not able to get what we need through our HR department, city. And I think that covers, does that make sense to everybody?
I think so.
Okay.
Does everybody feel confident, up to speed around those three components? Yep, okay, great. Thank you so much. Management committee.
For the management committee that we just had, basically what we did was to go through the election process. So, looking at the library board, bylaws, the Illinois Open Meetings Act, and Robert's Rules of Order. There is a quick reference, for the board that can be found in the package for the management meeting that kind of talks about, the timelines, talks about nominating committee, talks about the order of election, voting requirements, types of votes that we can do, and what's needed to be recorded in the minutes. For this, I'm just gonna go over the frequently asked questions really quickly. If there's any, everyone has access to this, but some of the, on the last page has frequently asked questions. Just as we are getting into the pace of elections, wanted to make sure that everyone had this really clear on, as we're going through the process. So, questions that I have here are, can a trustee nominate themselves? Yes, they can. Does nominations require a second? It does not. Is secret ballot allowed? Is not recommended, since we do follow the Open Meetings Act. If we did want to do a written ballot inside the document, it shows how we would go about that. The recommended or preferred method is a roll call vote for our election. If no candidate receives the majority, then we do additional rounds of voting until there is a majority candidate, or the election can be put on hold. An officer you can only be elected for one position. So once if you are on several positions and you're elected to multiple positions, you have to decide which one you want to continue on. If you decide to abstain, so yes, a trustee can abstain, but an abstention does not count as a cast vote. Can the board reopen nominations? We kind of talked about this, but reopening nominations, yes. You can reopen nominations as long as the election process hasn't started as a whole. And if you are remote, you can vote once we've been given permission to do meeting over. So this is just a quick guide for us to look through and get a good understanding on how is the correct way for us to go through the election process.
Any comments or feedback? again, thank you for doing that. I think it's super helpful. I appreciate that. Is there, who else is on facilities with Katie? Anybody? You are.
Yeah, so
Does your-
we need to not, I'm over it.
Okay. DEIB.
Yes, so first of all, I want to thank Samir, who visited the DEIB committee when we met and provided us with a finance and budget update. Or overview, I'm sorry, not update, overview, and review of the current fiscal status. DEIB committee again did not have quorum. So we were not able to take any action. We did have some discussion. I mentioned to the committee the concerns of the board. And those who were present are concerned as well and have some thoughts, but like I said, we couldn't take any action. So we are still working on that. We also discussed the bylaw language and safety and facilities as potential areas to review and provide input. But again, no decisions were made. That's the final report.
Thank you. Are there additional questions or comments? Thank you. Communications.
Yes, the communication committee met on May 5th. And the main thing we did was talked about some language and crafted some language to add potentially to the FAQ on the board page of the web page. About HB 5236, which is the House bill that's a Consumer Protection Act, the Digital Library Protection Act. And this act has moved to the Senate. It won unanimously in the House and it's now in the Senate. And essentially, this is going to help libraries negotiate more equitably to get better licensing and contracts and pricing on ebooks and audiobooks, so that they can make more of them accessible to our patrons. So we wanted to add a little language to the FAQ, and if I have 2 minutes, I'll just read that in paragraph to you, so you'll all comment on it. Let me know what you think. So this would be the last paragraph in the FAQ site. And the heading is, what other factors challenge the library in expanding its digital collection? Ebooks and audiobooks are in high demand and make up a large portion of the materials circulated by EPL. Demand for e-materials continues to grow, and our collection development and finance teams consider this in purchasing and planning. However, prices for digital materials sold to libraries are high, typically nearly 4 times higher than what consumers pay for the same items. These high costs, along with publishers' stringent contract terms, result in fewer titles purchased and longer wait times for patrons. In April 2026, the Illinois House of Representatives passed House Bill 5236, known as the Digital Library Protection Act, legislation that would give libraries fair contract protections so that they may more effectively negotiate with publishers to achieve faster and more equitable access to ebooks for our patrons. The bill, which was passed in the House by a vote of 99-0, has now been moved to the Illinois Senate for consideration. For more information on what you can do to support this bill, see the Illinois Library Association's Digital Library Protection Act HB 5236 page, and specifically the call to action and resources section. So we're really asking our folks to talk to their legislators about this and get behind it. I'm sure some of you have seen the great press that this has been getting. And several of our competitor libraries, our other libraries in North Suburban Illinois have been posting on their sites similar verbiage so that we can get our patrons aware of this issue and behind this Protection Act. Any questions or thoughts about adding this to our FAQ?
I do have a kind of a broader question about how we should be leveraging that part of the website, the board specifically. I think there's a difference between operations and policy level communication. And we were talking, Heather and I were talking, and Ellen, we're talking about this a little earlier, about like, so the board, in order for us to post anything, it needs to be board action. But are all of the things, like that is not an action of the board, right? We're not saying we're not doing anything, right? So is that a board thing to do, or is that, and if it is, what should be the process for posting things so that it doesn't, cause like that's not time sensitive, but like. I guess just something for us to be thinking about, like, how should the process work? Is it the board's responsibility? Like, how should the board communicate? Well, what is the most effective way for the board to communicate? And how should the process work? Because having to wait, 2 months, basically, to post on the frequently asked questions seems kind of nuts. But also you don't want the board to be in a position of like constantly talking either, like that, like there's a reason why the board talks in meetings. Yeah, Michelle?
So right now, I think the problem maybe is that it's the library board's FAQs, it's not the library's FAQs.
Yeah,
And we were trying to communicate some of these more complex issues around. We were getting all these questions about what's happening between you and the city, and we were trying to communicate some of the background information. And now some of these things are important, but not part of that. And maybe this is an example of something that is very operational, should be in the EPL FAQ update bucket somewhere else. This isn't like a board update, right? Like this isn't something we need communications control over. In my mind.
I would say that we might want to communicate about this because we do have, as a board, a fiduciary responsibility to the library, to thinking about how to make these materials more affordable for our patrons. And that, along with some of the hiccups that we've had with our digital collection, and which we also address on our FAQ, make this a little bit more natural as a policy comment that the board would have something to say about.
yeah,
Jean, Tracy, I have a question.
please.
I'm sorry, is it okay? I didn't hear. Was it okay to go forward?
Yes.
Thank you. Jean, you mentioned that other libraries also have made comments about this. Has it been other libraries on their operations side, or other libraries in the board of other libraries have made comments about this?
That's a good question. I haven't done an analysis of other libraries' boards' communications, but I can come back to this board with that. I need some time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That would be interesting to just sort of analyze how other boards are communicating.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
So, I will also say that Ellen, as our communication manager, has been communicating about this issue, specifically this bill from the library, like on the library channels, like on social media, sharing something from Rails or something from Hensley, et cetera. So it is this particular issue around that bill and advocating for what it means for a public library, explaining what it means is something that on the operations side we have been communicating about. Yeah. So, I mean, I would think that there are some issues where maybe the voice of both would there be an appropriate reason that both voices would chime in about something like this. But there could be other things that are specific to the board.
Yeah.
Specific.
Are we going?
I'm thinking that maybe it makes sense for us to word it in a way of support after the library has been. So on the boards, FAQs, it would be more of a in alignment with, in support of, that kind of framing.
Mhm.
After the library has written something, so the library has already written something about it, so if we think about. If we're going to say something, it's one of those like in support of the library because of our chair, you know, like
Mhm.
that kind of framing, I think that that makes sense to sit in the FAQ,
Mhm.
maybe not the way it's currently. written.
It's interesting thought. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's most prescient for me is process. Like, so communications meets early May. And has a conversation like, hey, we should post about this. It's gonna take, 2 weeks to get onto the board agenda. The board says, yes, we like it, or no, we don't. So then it's another month, like, but the board doesn't communicate in the same way that the institution does. Generally, the board only communicates in meetings, right? So the fact that we had this problem of people misunderstanding or not participating in meetings, we had to solve that by like creating this, frequently asked questions. But now I wonder like, how do we do we kind of like have a sub narrative, I guess is my question, like, do we as a practice always have something kind of going on that's not necessarily directly from the meetings, but is this like side public conversation? Does that make sense what I'm saying? Yes,
Well,
Michelle.
I mean, I think the other piece that you're naming here in the process, and Gina and I just spoke about this between meetings, which is not knowing how to, like, where to, like, the public process, means that you have to put something in a packet publicly before you're ready to share something, which this isn't being, not transparent with the public. It just means it's not baked yet. It's not sharing, the correct information or the correctly characterized information. Sometimes we're still workshopping it to make sure it's accurate and the right people have read it. But to put it, she was asking, do I put this on management or do I put this on finance? And I said, well, finance is where we've been meeting and you have to make sure the meetings line up to timely share information in the right way. So inherently, I think that when you're trying to have communications that are timely and accurate to share in a meaningful way, our OMA meeting structure is really a challenge here for this.
For sure.
And then to the extent possible, we may want to leverage our institutional structures and think about what the board role is in that.
Yeah,
Because it's a real challenge right now. Like, what if we actually had something urgent we needed to communicate? Like, what would we do there? Like, we call a meeting, I know that, but like, how would we get board? Like, that's really hard to do right now. It's May. Although, yeah.
yeah, I mean, so our bylaws say that the president can speak for the board, right? But like, to your point, if somebody was like aliens landed on the roof, what would be the process for me or the president communicating about the aliens having landed? Would Ellen send, I mean, I assume Ellen would tell Heather and Heather would, yeah,
I think our code covers that.
right,
And it includes like, it would be like, does this qualify as an emergency?
right.
In an emergency, this is.
Well.
What if it's not an
Said
emergency?
something, like, not an emergency, but something urgent, it's not an emergency that falls outside of the code, like we talked about this earlier.
Any aliens is an emergency.
Yeah, like classifying what's urgent and emergent.
Because this is something that is timely,
Yeah.
eventually it's in assignments now, but it's gonna be in a committee soon and hopefully voted on. So if we want people to get behind a policy that supportive of. So, maybe not the most pressing example, but I wholeheartedly agree that we have to have a more streamlined process if that's possible now.
Yeah.
I think the idea about the library FAQ versus the board FAQ is probably worth continuing discussion about.
Yeah.
And the FAQ right now, part of where it sort of originated from was how do we have a persistent place where, because this is an issue that the board has heard from the community about, how do we have a place that continues to live that says that we're aware of the issue and this is how it's being worked on right now. Just as with the like IGA and service level agreements, here's the issue, here's how we're working on
Yeah,
it. Something that is available to patrons, you know, at 2 in the morning, that's when we want to look it up.
yeah. I think
Maybe that was the context.
yeah, I think I understand the context. I think the thing that we do need to like come to a conclusion about is that, to your point, OMA exists for a reason, and to create a side, a process that looks like it's circumventing, like, OMA does not seem wise. And to Jean's point, this, it's not urgent, like, I didn't realize that aliens would seem this urgent. That didn't seem super urgent to me. You know, we all have different things to worry about. But like, so I, as an individual person, care about the timing of that. So I posted on my social media about that, right? Or like individually. But is it the board that should be saying that? Like, we're having a conversation about it. I think if I asked for a straw poll, that everybody would agree this is important. And there's a way to document that we felt that that was important within the context of the meeting. But how do we avoid the expression that's coming to mind is whack-a-mole? Is that there's so many things that we might care about, that we might want to communicate about, and how do we avoid looking like we're having a shadow meet, like a, not a meeting, but a meeting, you know what I mean? Does that make sense? And also avoid having to involve the president or the board, like. The rule has been, nothing goes up unless the board agrees to it, right? So, which makes sense, that's logical, but to your point, Jean, like, everything. Like, everything, like, does every little, like, it seems like yes, because we should not be speaking. No, no one should be speaking for the board unless it's the board, so we shouldn't have a process that.
It's another way of framing it is that the things that go up should be things that have been discussed and actioned
Right,
in a meeting.
right,
Right, so there's nothing in the FAQ that hasn't already been
right,
discussed,
right,
which in practice would mean, yes, everything that's there, but that. What it really needs is that the FAQ is a. As Michelle has helpfully did today, it's a sort of summary of, we've been talking about this, it's been talked about.
mm-hmm,
Here's a one-stop place to find the summary of what's been discussed in public.
yeah,
It's not an additional source of information of something that has not been discussed.
right,
It's more like a plain language summary of the discussion, not an extra resource to supplement what may or may not have happened.
yeah,
And that may not be a super clear distinction, but in my head, it's making sense, where it's like, if the board had a discussion and said, we're in support of X, Y, and Z, then the FAQ would say, this meeting, the board expressed these opinions.
right,
Which is different from, here's our opinion. It didn't actually happen.
right.
Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, that is exactly what I'm getting.
So it's 2 types of communication. Is that what you're saying, Victoria?
I'm saying I'm suggesting that there could be 2 types.
Yeah.
And that the FAQ to remain compliant should be very rigorous about,
Yeah.
like, we should be able to reference the meeting in which this thing was discussed. Right?
Right, but if we want to do something that's more of the moment and informational, because it's an issue that maybe isn't completely finalized, still do that somehow, we just have to figure out how, right?
I don't know that we can, I think that's,
We would
that,
follow the operations of the library, so. Like,
yeah,
Like, the library is sharing out this thing. We as individual members could share that in our individual spaces.
Amplify.
Right.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I like that on your own, so more that versus speaking as the board.
right, that makes sense. So that would be a different topic, that would be a more on board like topic. You know what I mean? So it wouldn't be something having to do with broader issues that the board has jurisdiction over. be more tactical, operation. This is tough.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
The big communications that they do for work. We can track different examples and maybe bring that back and see.
I
just
hate,
feel like we're swirling.
I
Yeah.
hate that it's taking so long, like, that's the part that I'm like. Where it shows up as tension, because it's like, okay, so this thing. Obviously, if I did a straw poll, we would all agree, right? But is that communication that should come from the board? Or is that communication that should come from the library, that then the board, as individual people, amplifies? Because we're not operational, we are policy level with governance, right? So, but it is a law, which is governance. I don't know. I truly have no idea. I don't know what to tell you. Like, think about it.
All right, so nobody's laughing. I feel like I'm gonna sound like an outlier, but I feel like the lens that we should look at all of this from is, or through, is, is it being communicated operationally? Right, and if it is, then do we need to communicate it again? And I think that we are, we have, I understand the need to want to communicate and in some cases really make sure that we're driving the lesson home. But sometimes I don't think that we need to over communicate. Sometimes I feel like over communication is oversaturation. And so we just those are my thoughts. I like if we are not taking a stance, first of all, this is an FAQ. So I think with an FAQ, that's a little bit different, you know, where the FAQs are intended to answer questions, right? So the only way I can see us communicating this is to say the board supports this decision. And so then my thought, immediate my thought as a former journalist, like do we need to say the board supports this decision in an FAQ when we can personally advance it through our social media? So those are my thoughts.
So I guess the question should be, what should be on the agenda for the June meeting? If anything, should there be like, what should be, what problem are we solving? How are we solving, what's the problem and how do we solve it? Chair?
The problem we're trying to solve is explaining what factors challenge the library in expanding its digital collection. Put it on the June meeting or not. For the president. I tried to put this in the packet, but it didn't make it in. Sorry, guys. It isn't voted on it.
Yeah. I truly don't know.
If that's the problem, is it a problem if the board staff, I mean, if the EPL staff is already communicating that information? I mean, it seems like our FAQ is out of date, so I think that's a separate, slightly separate problem, but is if proactively communicating the most current information into our channels is our actual problem, like, and Ellen's already doing that, do we have a problem? Or is our problem that our FAQ is out of date, and then we have a separate problem? And that is like, let me just say it, emblematic of a larger set of things we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes, but
Yeah.
so it's not.
I mean, even the fact that it didn't make it to the packet is an illustration of the problem. Is that, you know, it wasn't attached to an email, then trying to get it attached to an email, like,
Actually,
like. Oh, okay.
yeah.
I didn't get, like, the chair of the committee, whatever the committee is, so the board is me, you would be the chair of your committee. facilities, whoever sets the agenda. So like, I can't, I don't know, I don't know what the right, I don't know what the right thing to do is. And there's no action, there's nothing, I can't get you all to decide because there's no item for action. So perhaps on the June meeting, the agenda item could be the process for adding items to the board frequently asked questions. And is there a sub item for discussion and action around this particular item? So 2 items. One, just in general, communications committee, second, about this particular. Still don't feel confident. But I had time. I had 5 days before the meeting. Figured out. So if anybody has any ideas, I'm open.
Process for adding items to the board FAQ.
Mhm.
So that wouldn't be just the communications committee recommends that something be added and then the board votes on it.
So I guess that was the point, is that if something is like. So everything would take at least a month
Right.
to be added, at least. And then the problem for me with that would be that like a repost suggestion around how it was worded needs to be changed. That means everything would take at least 2 months. So like, is it actually useful? Like, how do you make it useful if everything takes 2 to 3 months to get it on the back? How does that?
Especially if it's a timely.
Yeah, like it just, that doesn't seem very efficient or effective. So how
The
do they do
FAQ
that?
is more, as Victoria put it, for persistent communication about what we have unified thoughts about. But we could discuss this in June. I don't want to spend more time on it.
Okay. Any additional feedback? Okay. Search committee.
Yes, so, this ad hoc committee.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Can I?
Yes.
Chair of the communications committee, can I offer to something?
Yes.
Okay. There was well, first, I want to thank Jean for her leadership on that communications committee, because we've been navigating a bunch of ways of coming at these things, and also Ellen, who just has been an incoming resource to the committee and provides a ton of information and has had a consistently communicating with the
Yeah.
library community, internally and externally, about all these issues, so.
Of course.
Make sure we. I also wanted to offer, folks may have seen, there was a New York Times article recently about what it takes to get a book into circulation in a public library, and they use the Iowa City Library as an example. And it was it definitely mentioned, and the reason I'm raising it is because these are issues that our library also is facing around like changes in the publishing industry and how that impacted libraries and their ability to obtain titles in a timely way, like how it impacted the time frame. We've heard from patrons about, my gosh, why they're taking so long to get the book. And then also the impact that like budget cuts have, how that's impacted the process. And so I just would, we haven't seen it, would encourage folks to take a look at it. It's one of those articles that's like a scroll, and like it's got lots of little videos and visuals as they're sort of pointing out, like, this is what it takes. And then when this publisher went bankrupt, this is what happened to the process for everyone. And so it's a nice way for folks to understand, for public to understand what our staff are very heroically pulling off every day.
Yes.
It seems like we need to speak up because of the air conditioning, because it's like they're throwing out their chairs to hear us. If we just speak up.
Yell.
Okay.
Yell.
Thank you.
Don't remind to get hurt.
That's it.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Back to you, search.
Okay, so, the ad hoc search committee has met 3 times in this last month, so we've been busy. talking through a lot of different pieces of what we wanted to bring as a recommendation. So we will discuss this soon, but just wanted to let you know that we've had visitors at our meetings, which has been very helpful. So thank you, trustees, for joining us in these conversations to allow for some collaboration around language and what we're seeing. That's it.
Oh. Thanks. Okay, nominating committee.
Nominating committee, well, since trivia night's come up a couple times, I just wanted to say. It was a super fun night, I wanna underscore that, and it felt like a real community event, so. One of the members of my team hadn't been inside the building in over 40 years. And so
Oh,
like
wow.
literally like where the front doors where now. Was a
Yeah.
whole experience for them, and another member of our team has now been proudly wearing their EPL shirt, which we got as part of our swag win bag, around town, showing off to everyone and telling the story.
Did win around.
And perhaps not, Michelle, but I just want to say that you and your Babies Got Stacks team, which is a fantastic name and hasn't been heard in this room enough lately. But I really felt like, you have been and continue to be a real model for excellence and calling people to do their best and to step up, and I'm just glad my team could answer the call.
Oh. Wow. Did it just get like 20 degrees colder? And what's that related to nominating?
So good at like the encouraging words to get people to get up, get it done, so.
It was finance committee updates.
Wow.
Okay, so nominating committee.
Yes.
Met twice since being seated, and we've connected with all the board members. They're interested in leadership positions, and we'll be presenting our recommended slate of candidates in a later agenda.
Thank you very much. Any questions about that? No. Okay. Next is old business. So, meeting practices and parliamentary procedure guide. So, trustee Donna did an excellent job of creating a document that is in the management committee meeting. And we just wanted to make sure, and one of the things that worries me a little bit is that I get, as a former marketing professional, the idea of, effective communication, but also remembering that this body is not the same, or public bodies are not the same as, a corporation, or an institution in that way. So a little nervous about maybe overdoing it. But are there any questions about parliamentary procedure and our meeting practices? Like how to get agenda item, anything that was included in that packet, are there any questions about it?
I love that this was put together. It's not a question, it's much as an appreciation.
Yeah.
I just think it's really helpful. I think of our packet it is our board packet, but it's
Yeah.
also part of our communication to the public. And
Yes.
so this is just also a really wonderful opportunity to invite everyone's understanding about the processes, policies and procedures that we follow. So that they can follow along with us.
Any other comments, questions, suggestions? Shade at each other?
I just want to thank you all for putting this together. It's a lot of work. It's added effort and time, and so I'm really grateful for that. So thank you so much, and I like the photos.
That I realized I stole from the round table, so now I'm like, and I didn't credit the round table, so thank you, round table, for these fantastic pictures that we used in our packet. Sorry. Okay, so no questions about any of that, great. And now nominating committee, the slate of candidates.
Slate of candidates, so another quick reminder of our process with the nominating committee. members spoke with every current trustee to at their interest and answer any questions about the roles. And so the result of those conversations, nominations made either by trustees themselves or of fellow trustees, that list is in your agenda, right? It's on the agenda. So I'll keep this out. Also, just want to highlight that the voting procedures and the order and all of those things that are in the resource that trustee data put together is also relevant to the slate and how they'll be voted on at the next meeting. So our slate of candidates recommended by the nominating committee for this board to approve. The recommendations are for President Michelle Mills. For Vice President, we have two candidates, Fareed Bodada and Tracy Foltz. For Secretary, two candidates, Jean Kelleher and Esther Wallen, and for Treasurer, Victoria Shire. These are the recommendations of the committee. Are there any questions from the group? And also, this is an opportunity for any new nominations to be made from the floor or changes to nominations by any nominated candidate. All kinds of hands. Who chairs this part of the conversation? You? Do I call it?
I guess I do.
You could go.
So I'm gonna call myself,
Go.
and I am removing myself from the slate. There's that. Surprise, surprise. Dr. Walton,
On behalf of.
okay, thank you.
I'm removing myself from the slate as well.
Jean,
I'm removing myself from the slate as well.
okay. Any other comments, questions, suggestions?
Also a time when new nominations can be made. And if anyone nominated, the nominating committee would follow up with that nominee to confirm their interest, so. Hold space for that.
Okay, so the slate is now changed to President Michelle Mills, Vice President Aribo Dada. There is no candidate for secretary, and there is a candidate for treasurer. Right. So just so everybody, gentle reminder that that means in June, there could also, before we vote, there could be nominations from the floor. But if no one is running, then the president can appoint. So like, it's not the end of the world if no one decides right this second that they want to do it or not want to do it. There's still space for that to be resolved. Any other questions, comments, or yes?
So it says action. So what was the action?
We're voting on this slate. The slate as amended. So is everybody clear on the slate as amended? Is there a motion to approve the slate of candidates as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Bill and secretary, we call the roll.
Kelleher,
Yes.
Mills,
Yes.
Shay,
Yes.
Shire. Yes. Wallen. Yes. Amamu,
Yes.
Dada, yes, Falls.
Yes. Excellent. Next is new business. The ad hoc search committee. Chair.
Okay, so, Heather so kindly is getting some slides, loaded up for us to have a conversation. Just as a reminder, we were, asked to come together and, build a recommendation, around what this search would look like and, kind of looking to the future too of, the executive director search going on. So what I wanted to make sure we were focused on is that we are focused on this interim executive director search. And you can go to that, so thank you. So a couple of main areas of focus here and recommendations. The first is building a search committee. So we would need a search committee created. I do think this will be for a fairly long period of time because my vision would be and that this committee is working on the interim search and things that need to iterate through this process and then begin the executive director search as well. So ideally 3 board members, so that, updates can be gathered, discussion can happen to then bring to the board, for, if there are any adjustments. When we go through searches, things change a lot, right? It's a very fluid process. And so we want to be able to navigate that as we move along. So the creation of that search committee, I think is important. The second piece is that this will be an internal and an external search, so we will do both at the same time. And then have a final selection once we get to the end. And then the other piece is this search budget. So in looking at some of the costs related to this, we do have a little bit of resources that need to be spent. And so asking for $5,000 we thought was a fair amount for the pieces that we might need in this interim search. Yeah, thank you. So one of the pieces we need to discuss as a board and ensure that we are on the same page about is the profile. So we want to talk about, what is this interim executive director? What are the skills? What are the qualifications for this person? And so this is what you have here is pieces of the job description that we were drafting to talk a little bit about this. As you can see, we have this as somebody who will be full-time on site here at the main street branch. The duration of time we came up with was up to 18 months. So in an interim role, ideally that will be shorter, but we just don't know, as we've known in the past. This has taken longer than we'd like. So we want to just make sure we have a little bit of wiggle room there at the time. And then there is a salary range here. I want to point out in the memorandum that I sent, it said TBD. We were still waiting on the information from the city around this level. And so I have the range here. So this is that base salary range for this particular level. As what that range would look like. With posting roles, we do need to be transparent about salary. That's very important. And so that's why we have this range as well. And then a few options that we have discussed. One being the full-time with benefits for the period of time this person is in this role, or the opportunity for it to be more of a consultant, which is more hourly without those benefits. So those are the two kind of things for us to discuss and think about as to how we want to approach this. Would you mind into that next one? And so here are really those areas of focus on the responsibilities of the role and then the competency. So these are some of those skills for the profile of the person that we're going to be assessing through the process. And this is again, pieces of the job description as well. Does anyone have any questions about this? Is there anything that jumps out or concerns?
Well, I think Saturday. It's very interesting.
Oh, yeah. We'd love to hear you. I think you're muted.
Oh, yeah, she's.
Sorry about that. I did have a couple of questions. One was with the hourly rate, are we assuming that it's just going to be based on the salary range and then it's just going to be made into an hourly amount, or is the hourly rate going to be adjusted because we're not going to be paying the person fringe and benefits?
I think that's a very good question. I did a little bit of research on that to come up with a bit of a formula. again, if we determine that having this kind of hourly consultant option is something we want to do. If we do, one of the pieces that gets tricky is when folks are being paid per hour and there are no benefits that are attached to that. Often the hourly rate is much higher. And
Yes.
so sometimes that is very expensive comparatively. And so I think we need to determine what that's gonna look like and what we feel is right in our fiduciary responsibility. One sort of suggestion on how to sort of honor and figure out those hourly rates would be, we could look at, you know, sort of the range, like that minimum salary and the maximum salary. You know, and kind of looking at what that would be per hour. But thinking about the fact that when you bill hours, you are not getting vacation time, you're not getting paid for time off. And so those hours typically are lower, right, than the typical 2080 in a year. So it might look more like 1,800 billable hours, right, per year. And so then per hour, there would be sort of a minimum and maximum salary. So perhaps that's, you know, like $85 an hour on the minimum side. On that maximum side, it's more like $128 an hour. There is typically a higher premium, as I said, for hourly employees. Some of that is expenses that that person might have. It also is, you know, all of the insurance and things that they are not, you know, that is not getting provided. So thinking about those hourly base rates and then adding in a 15% kind of premium to that is kind of the recommendation from the research that I did. And so what we could do is have this hourly rate and say, you know, it's this to this per hour, and it will not exceed, you know, a certain amount, or it will not exceed a certain amount of billable hours. So that that structure is there to kind of help us protect against maybe more money being spent than we would like. So that is
Yes.
a possibility. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. I'm more thinking along the lines of a messaging, because if indeed we do go down the road of a consultant and then somebody just does simple math and then they just add it all up, they're going to wonder why it's so much higher. So I mean, people out there in the public. So I'm just thinking, just think that piece of it, think it through. And the other thing that the other question I was thinking of is it possible for the person who's serving as interim director to apply for the full-time position, for the permanent position?
Yes, I do believe that that would be possible for whomever is in that interim role. They would have to apply to it because it is a new position that we would be, you know, searching for. But yes, it would be possible. And that would be great.
Yeah, one thing that comes up, can we go back to the slide with the money?
Sure.
Okay, so the one thing that and I don't know how this should be presented, but if you are a current employee, you get, and I forgot what it's called, Heather, can you tell us exactly what it's called? But you get it's not differential, is it called differential? It's called something else, right?
Well, it's called a TDA, a temporary.
Temporary duty assignment. Yeah, so I don't know how the temporary duty assignment is calculated, but it's not just the salary range. So we might want to make it clear, because if we frame it as though this is the salary, it implies that a current employee, we need to be conscientious. Yeah, I'm not sure how to say this exactly.
So perhaps it's something like we have the salary range. And then we have something, is there something descriptive we want to say around internal candidates receive
I think both around Samia's question and the internal posting the salary range is not as clear as it would be if we were just posting a job for a single, for any. I don't know why I'm struggling, maybe not enough caffeine, but like everybody. I mean, I assume Heather is still in there. Or anyone would still be in there, but it's temporary duty assignment, it's not just that salary. Does that make sense? What I'm saying, is that necessary?
You want me to tell you about that?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe we drop an asterisk next to the salary, and underneath the asterisk, we sort of put language along the lines of, subject to experience and city regulations and pay scale and all of that. Maybe you have a couple of sentences there that sort of signals that, this is just that, a range, and because I could definitely see somebody doing the math and sort of, and if we go with the consultant route, sort of say, whoa, you're way out of range of what you posted originally. Anyway.
Heather, you were gonna say about TBA?
Actually, so there are two things in the city. There's something called TTR, temporary transfer rate, and TBA. So when someone is acting in a different role as an interim,
Yeah.
they get, so here it's TTR, right? TTR actually, temporary transfer rate. And the way that that is determined currently in the city is that they get either the starting salary of that role that they're acting up into, or 25% more than their current salary, whichever one of those is higher. And then that's how it works for an interim role.
Got it.
Those, when the interim is not meant to last longer than a certain amount of time, and after that certain amount of time, can be adjusted up by a certain percent.
And do you know off the top of your head what that time is?
I think it's a year, but I have to check.
Okay.
So the idea would be that if the person's in this work for a year, then after a year, based on evaluation, there's the potentials for it.
Got it.
But I'd have to look at the exact details. That.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Megan, were there more parts of the profile you wanted to present before?
Yeah, I'd love to move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So these are, on the job description, the draft that we have right now. We have minimum qualifications and preferred qualifications. And so this is what we came up with, based on all of the different text and language we've been using for other roles that we've been working on in the last few years and through our discussions, through these last few weeks. Any questions here? Any comments on it? Does this work?
This is the last slide.
No, I do have a few more. So I really wanted to just talk through the memorandum essentially. So what I have here is really more of the timeline. So focusing on kind of that posting and then screening process. And as I put an asterisk here, because as we know, all dates there's a potential for this to change, right? Depending on so many different factors. So this is a general plan of how I think we could do this in a timely fashion. So if we get to a place tonight where we feel like we can approve, this recommendation, then we would start tomorrow with edits on this job description to get it posted. One of the most important things in a search is to get the word out, right? So we want to make sure we do that. Make sure that the role is posted and the instructions for applying are clear on, certainly the website, of course, our own, but then also some other job sites. So I have a couple of recommendations there as well, but ultimately, that is where some of this money would be spent. And again, you kind of want to really get everything out in a very big way to begin with, and then ideally you will cultivate some candidates that way from just reaching out to lots of different networks. So that is the job posting piece, right? So, and I drafted up a press release as well, so we would get that out tomorrow. And then we would have the job posted, right, for a period of 2 weeks. So the idea here is that anyone would apply, for that period of time. And then we would really mirror the process that we did for the RFP process in terms of reviewing. So as opposed to an RFP review, this would be a resume review. And so we would have board members scoring those applicants based on what those qualifications are, et cetera. Katie, our current secretary, would and has agreed to managing that part of the process like she did the last time. So she would then share out that list of the candidates, the qualified candidates, the board reviews. And then I would reach out to those folks and do an initial screen, so an initial interview with them. And then that would be through the 15th of June. And then as you see at the end there, I would share those recommendations and just, what those conversations were in the June 17th meeting to then determine who would move to the next stage of the process. And if you would mention that, thank you. So the idea would be then we would sift to, depending on our what our slate looks like, a first round of video interviews. So that would be the 18th through the 24th of June. Ideally, we would have trustees looking at those scores, looking at those videos and scoring them based on the skills that we're assessing. And then we would have, a publicly noticed meeting that this is like right towards the end of June, the 26th, debrief in executive session about this, discuss scores, make some final decisions on candidates to kind of that final round. And that final round being in-person interviews. And again, a lot of this is going to depend on what our slate is and whether or not that's needed. But ideally, I just wanted to sort of put all of it out there so we can have it all on the table. So that June 27th through the 8th, and then the same kind of scorecard process of all of those trustees sharing those scores, and then debriefing an executive session during that July meeting to kind of determine the finalists, the offer, start date, etc., and publicly voting on that process. Then we would notify that candidate ideally on the 16th, and then begin into that pre-employment verification process. We just don't know how long that might take if are thinking about external candidates, and then have that interim executive director start August or September. So that's that kind of timeline for interviews and decisioning. And again, could be adjusted, of course, depending on your need. Any questions on that timing pieces? Does this all make sense?
I do have a couple of questions. For the screening interviews, are those going to be by phone or virtually?
So, do you mean from the top of this says first round video interview schedule? So that would be
No,
video.
the previous slide. Yes, correct. Yeah, where you've got it's next to your name. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, typically, those are either video or over the phone. In my experience, in terms of recruiting, many times I do those, in my professional life, over the phone. I find that to be the most useful to have, a consistent set of questions and to be consistent about all the information I'm receiving through the phone versus having a video conversation as well. So my thought would be phone. But if anyone has, thoughts about that or wants it to be a different way, I'm open to that as well.
And then as it pertains to the virtual interviews where you are, that we've now got into that first round, are you going to record them or are you just going to have it as it,
Yes.
no recording?
Yes, so they would be recorded. The idea on the video round would be we'd have two trustees. So there would be two trustees interviewing the candidate. We'd have a set of questions. And they would be assigned certain questions to ask. And then that would be recorded with that candidate. And then the other trustees would be able to watch the video and everyone would have a scorecard. So it would have all the skills that we're assessing and each each trustee would then score the candidates. And then share those back and, a discussion would happen at the debrief session.
And then my last question here is you got notified candidate pre-employment. I'm guessing nobody on the board is doing that because you don't have anybody's names next to it. That
Correct, so the pre-employment verification piece, right, would be like, if we have an external candidate that we are bringing in for this. And it is someone that we are hiring in, full-time with benefits, right? In this interim role, right? So, they would, go through the HR process. These are the services that we pay the city for. And so a part of why I have this not sure of the time is because we don't know how long that would take. In our history, that has taken sometimes a very long time. And so we just don't quite know. But that would be the services that the city provides around background checks and, their employment verification process.
right. And then my last question is for the in-person interviews, would you pay for a candidate to come in from out of state for an in-person interview?
So that's a piece of why we're asking about $5,000 to have for this process, thinking that if we do, and they are one or two people from out of state or whatever that is, that we would have some money that we could spend on that purpose. So ideally, we have this $5,000, quite a bit of that could be used for that if we need it. But, obviously, we want to be thoughtful about it and not go overboard too. Anything else on you? Okay,
Thank you.
good questions. Thank you. Yeah. Can you move to the next slide? And so this is kind of talking through that process as well, the structure of it. And then also some reminders around OMA. So, the pieces that we especially want to talk about tonight is, this decision, right, to conduct this search. To move forward with this recommendation, ensure the job description and the candidate profile are, what we agree on, and then this compensation range piece. So those are the pieces we need to kind of decide in our public meeting tonight and discuss. And then certainly when we get to a place where we are making final decisions about hiring, that would also have to happen in public, right? So that would be the voting piece in a public meeting. And so the executive session piece for us is when we're talking about specific candidates. And salary negotiations for individuals or, something related to, let's say, employment matters with, current employees, etc. Is that helpful? Everybody?
Yeah.
Great. Any questions, thoughts? Okay, we can go, sorry, yeah. So yeah, so these are just the next steps. Yes.
I have a couple questions. On the profile, in the hiring, it seems like that the choices that the committee's presenting are as either full-time with benefits or it's an hourly contract, and I'm wondering if. I would just be curious to hear about the thinking on whether the contract could be a flat rate or. Was there a reason it had to, that the committee was recommending an hourly versus a flat rate?
I just was thinking about consulting. As an hourly rate, I think. I was not thinking about a flat rate. I think a piece of it is about. What might be, I didn't think about that at all, so I don't know. But
And I should have
hear your
started with
thoughts
thank you
on
for
that.
all this, I should have started with thank you for all this work, this is like
Yeah,
very,
that's
very
okay.
well considered.
Is there a thought or recommendation you have on a flat rate?
I've seen flat rate, in the interim space and then in consulting space in general, but in hiring space as well, and be happy to share some models for that, that's helpful. And that kind of leads to I just wanted to highlight that while the salary for an employee with benefits could be different than what you think of as like the base labor rate for a consultant. The library, you know, right, the budget, we're paying the benefits on top of the salary, like in our budget, and so we could look at the conversion by using our fringe benefit rate, and I'm sure the finance committee, of course, could make recommendations on that, to make sure that the premium for a consultant who's not receiving a benefit is sort of aligned to what the budget would be paying for benefits. That's just a suggestion. But in my experience, I think a flat rate contract would probably be more attractive to a candidate as well as better meet the library's needs, so that we're not in a place of like, well, I would go to that meeting, but it's gonna put me into overtime. I've already worked X number of hours. They're not entitled to overtime, I understand that, but like, that we're not sort of negotiating, like, whether the person should show up based on whether it's a billable hour, if you will. And then also it provides more predictability for that person who's working, that they're like, right, I'm responsible for delivering these responsibilities, and I have my monthly rate is X, like, and that all kind of fits together, even if they're not being paid benefits, that rate can help them.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? Any recommendations from anyone around compensation, what we're thinking?
Michelle?
I mean, I am gonna propose that we table this. Anyway, before we vote or anything, and I think there's some strategic considerations that the board should work through. Before we get into these details, so I'm wondering how the board feel about tabling it at this point, and. If we have questions after executive session, we could still resolve those and then take a vote on this issue.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. Like, what it sounds like is that there's 3 separate items. There is the establishment of the committee, which we don't need a vote to do that. Establishment of the budget, we do need a vote for that, and posting of the job and job description, we would need a vote for that. So those are the items that as I see it, do you think that is that a correct assessment of the items?
I think so.
Okay.
The job description, though, we have to put the compensation in it. So that's where it gets tricky about kind of agreeing to what that's gonna look like.
Yeah. Yeah,
I like Michelle's suggestion though, coming back
Come
to
back
that
to
in
it.
this meeting.
yep, I agree.
Okay, we can come back to that. Any other feedback or thoughts on this recommendation overall?
It's very well.
Yeah.
So
I know.
you're helpful.
My plan is to get everything set up, right? So we have templates for all this stuff, right? We have a lot already created that we've done in the past. So that's the idea, is that it's then something that we can just move through, and there's not so much to do.
Yeah.
Through the process itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay,
let's tag in on any of this too, I'm happy to.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's come to item B, which is value-based budgeting. For the executive director search. Well,
You put that item on that.
I did. Why? Oh,
After the.
it's probably the $5,000, like. Oh, I do remember, so,
It's a little bit between that item and then.
and what we're at, yeah.
That item anymore.
Yeah, I don't know that we need this item, so I'm gonna strike it. Yeah, I'm gonna strike it. Okay, so then C was the government leadership and institutional stewardship summary. As you saw in your packet, I realized that I'm the longest serving member on the board, which seems insane. And so I was like, I want to get everything that I can recall into the document, because I think there are a lot of things that we did that, that happened before anyone else was on the board, or as people were transitioning on, that may not be obvious. And so, even the fact that the previous, assistant director role did not require a degree in library science, which I thought was crazy. Like, how did you be assistant director and not be a librarian? So there are lots of things in there. I just wanted to make sure that we documented those for the next leadership team. So that's that.
I just want to acknowledge the name that you sort of moved through that quickly, like, so that's that, right? But like, this is also a record of extraordinary leadership and contribution. And has I really provided a template for excellence in public leadership
Thank
and
you.
particularly for this community. So thank you.
That's really nice, thanks. Whee! Okay, so the plan, yes.
Draw attention that Samia, made a, you wanna speak?
So Savia,
I didn't know.
I just have to step away in a few minutes. That's all. Just it's
Yes.
9:30 where I am, so and I
yes.
just got an early start. Sorry.
So in addition to Samia stepping off of this meeting at 8:30, she will actually be stepping off the board in June. So she has one meeting left with us, and we want to thank her for her service and her commitment. It's a challenge, as Victoria just outlined. This is not a ladies who lunch situation, and so not at all. So thank you for your service. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been an honor working with all of you. All right. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
So our plan is that we are gonna go into executive session. Then when we come out of executive session, we will come back to new business item 8A and sit to it. All right. Pursuant to 5 Illinois compiled statutes 120/2A, I move that the Evanston Public Library Board convene into executive session to discuss an agenda item regarding personnel. This agenda item is a permitted subject to be considered in executive session and among enumerated exceptions under the Open Meetings Act. These exceptions are C1 and C2 and are set forth as follows. 2C, a public body may hold closed meetings to consider the following subjects: the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. 2, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. Is there a second? Second. Yes.
Say,
Yes.
Shire, yes.
Yes. Yes, Paul,
Yes.
Kelleher.
Yes.
So we'll send you a little. Thank you.